All right, let's dive right into the 2026 Union budget. We're going to break down what's good, what's confusing, and what seems to be missing, all from a straightforward, common sense point of view. So, was this budget a masterstroke or a total disappointment? You've probably heard both. Some people are praising it, while others are calling it a complete letdown. The truth, like it usually does, is probably somewhere in between. But the real question is, how can one document get such wildly different reactions? Well, the answer, and this is really the key to the whole thing, it all comes down to your perspective. On one side, you have the government's long-term strategic vision for the country's future. And on the other, you have the immediate, day-to-day pressures that people are feeling right now. You see, this budget is basically telling two completely different stories at the same time. And that's where all the friction comes from. Okay, so let's unpack that first story, the long-term vision. This is the government's game plan, right? Their blueprint for where they want to steer the country in the years to come. And this vision, it really stands on three big pillars. First, a massive, and I mean massive, push on infrastructure. Second, a real boost for domestic manufacturing. And third, a very clear commitment to being fiscally disciplined. Let's dig into each one. Now, the infrastructure part, this is probably the strongest piece of the whole budget. We're talking a huge focus on capital expenditure, building stuff, roads, railways, better logistics. Look, these aren't the kind of flashy projects that make headlines every day, but they are absolutely crucial for building a rock-solid economic foundation for years to come. Next up, manufacturing. The message here is pretty loud and clear. India wants to be more than just a services powerhouse. The idea is to really fire up the Make in India initiative by getting serious about things like semiconductors and electronics manufacturing. And that brings us to that third pillar, fiscal discipline. The government basically said, look, we're focusing on long-term productivity and building real assets, not on short-term freebies. And you can see why they do that. It's all about building confidence with big long-term investors. So, from that 30,000-foot view, the long-term plan looks pretty solid. Okay, but that's only one side of the coin. Now let's flip it over and look at the short-term reality. This is where you start to understand why a lot of people felt completely left out of this budget. Let's start with the middle class. I mean, for millions of people who are feeling totally squeezed by inflation, rising EMIs, rent that keeps going up, school fees, this budget left them with one massive question. And that question was pretty simple. Why didn't you even acknowledge us? And this is so important. The frustration wasn't just about not getting a tax break. It was the feeling of being invisible, of not being heard. Honestly, even a single sentence from the finance minister saying, hey, we get it, we know you're under pressure, could have changed the whole vibe. But the silence, it was deafening. And you see a similar communication gap when it comes to the youth. The budget talks a lot about indirect job creation. The logic that if you build a highway, jobs will eventually follow. And sure, that logic makes sense over time, but for a young person looking for a job right now, they need to hear about immediate opportunities, about skilling programs, about how to get their foot in the door. That direct, clear conversation just wasn't there. And with farmers, that disconnect was maybe even more obvious. The government is thinking long-term, rural growth, better infrastructure, direct money transfers. But farmers on the ground, they're worried about right now. For many, that means one thing, a legal guarantee for minimum support price, or MSP. And when the gap between what the government is offering and what people are asking for gets that wide, well, that's when you get a major trust problem. So what does all this add up to? It brings us right to the core of the problem, what we can call the Great Expectation Mismatch. This is that collision point where the government's long-term highway runs smack into the public's short-term reality. And it's really crucial to get this right. The backlash we saw, it wasn't really ideological, left versus right. It was something more fundamental. It was a mismatch between a government focused on planning for 2040 and a population worried about paying the bills in 2026. This table really lays it all out perfectly. Take jobs. The government's focus, indirect growth down the line. The public's need, direct clarity right now. Or taxes, government focus, fiscal stability. Public need, just some relief from inflation. Same story with farming. The government is talking long-term rural growth. Farmers are asking for short-term security. You see the pattern? On every big issue, it's like they were speaking two different languages. Okay, so where does that leave us? What's the final verdict on a budget that seems so strong in one way and so disconnected in another? Let's try and tie this all together.
When you step back, you see this was really a budget of two halves. On one side, it's technically pretty strong, right? It's got a clear vision, a solid plan for infrastructure. It's the kind of thing a long-term investor would probably love. But on the other side, it was emotionally weak. It just felt disconnected from the daily grind, and it seemed hesitant to even talk about the things people are really worried about. That makes it incredibly confusing if you're just a regular salaried person.
And that's why, at the end of the day, you have to say that both reactions are perfectly valid. If you look at this budget and feel hopeful about the country's long-term future, you're not wrong. But if you look at it and feel completely ignored and maybe a little anxious about your own situation, you're not wrong either.
So that really brings us to the final question, and this one is for you to think about. After hearing both sides of this tale of two realities, what did you take away from it? Did this budget make you feel more secure about the future, or did it just make you feel ignored?